Welcome back to the Daily Drama on WHUR 96.3 HD2 and Sirius XM Channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. Tonight, we are shining the spotlight on domestic violence. The numbers are skyrocketing with more than 10 million people impacted every year. And despite sounding the alarm, more victims remain in harm's way. Why is domestic violence such a difficult issue to combat? We're going to talk about that, and we'll have details on an event to assist children who have sadly witnessed domestic abuse. My guests are Dr. Denise McCain, Executive Director of the Prince George's County Family Justice Center, and Christine Neely, domestic violence survivor and board member of the Prince George's County Family Justice Foundation. Ladies, thank you so much for joining this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Sure thing. I have a couple of fast facts that I want to share with you, and certainly both of you are familiar with these numbers, but our listeners aren't always familiar with them. Here in the U.S., 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men experience physical violence from an intimate partner in their lifetime. Family and domestic violence is a common problem in the U.S., affecting some 10 million people every year. And women typically experience the high rate of intimate partner violence ages 18 to 34. And the one that we've been hearing for a really long time, for women, on average, they will make 7 attempts to leave an abuser before ending the relationship permanently. We've got these numbers to share, but obviously there are people behind these numbers. And I just wanted to kind of share a couple of things that have been in the headlines. Just earlier this month, a reporter in Cleveland, Ohio, a television reporter, was shot by her boyfriend, and he turned the gun on himself. She survived, just getting out of the hospital about a week or so ago. He did not. There was an incident that both of you may be familiar with yesterday that started in St. Mary's County with a woman being shot in St. Mary's County, and a police chase that ended in Charles County, and the man behind that shooting turned the gun on himself. And of course, one of the more horrific issues that has come to light. Last month, a woman was shot by her partner while nursing their child. Denise, just when you hear about these things, whether it's in Cleveland or in Charles County or right in our backyard, what comes to mind?
You know, Harold, these are very tragic situations, and I'm very sorry to hear about the loss of lives. And when, domestic violence is a very complex issue to begin with. And I think we really have to take a look at this. And, you point out these horrific numbers, these cases. I think when we take stock of the reality of it, we have to recognize that this is really more of a public health issue. It is not really a private family matter, a relationship between two people. It has very far-reaching implications and consequences, which we are seeing with the loss of lives. Children who are involved in these situations, 1 in 5 children, that was a statistic that you didn't give, are also directly impacted by abuse. So when I hear about these cases, it just tells me that we have to do more, and we have to take different measures to start really effectuating change. I think our actions to date have been more reactionary as opposed to preventative. And I think that's really one of the things that we should start looking at to see what we can do to sort of change, the narrative and really look at domestic violence as a serious public health crisis and what we can do to address it.
That's interesting, because a lot of these incidents, if not almost all of them, happen behind closed doors. Certainly, we know that we have seen some of these incidents that happen out in public. but the
Hmm.
majority of them happen behind closed doors. How can you prevent something that often you don't see the results of it until the end?
Well, again, that sort of speaks to what I was saying. It's really being more proactive, and I would say first and foremost recognizing what a domestic situation is, because I don't want to, of course, blame anyone,
Mhm.
particularly family members, but I can't imagine that there were not some indicators in these cases that these victims were being victimized, were in abusive relationships, and until, of course, now after the fact. So my thought process would be is that family members, people around them, uh, had they been more aware of what was going on, perhaps could have intervened, offered resources and help. Again, those are some very basic elementary things. But as you point out, it does happen behind closed doors, but it doesn't mean that those actions don't spill over into society. Something that people don't really think about, there's a very, very high correlation between domestic violence and mass gun shootings. I was just looking at an article and saw that more than two-thirds of mass shooters were involved in domestic violence incidences. So, we don't think about how does this stem into society. That's a perfect example of one. We also know that there are implications for the mental health system, depression, PTSD, anxiety, suicide. All of those have economic costs associated with it, loss of job, loss of work, time at work, going to school. Look at our institutions, our courts, our corrections, law enforcement, and even programs such as mine, advocacy. We spend a great deal of money trying to address this issue. So it's not just something that happens behind closed doors. Yes, as you pointed out, no one sees it when it happens, but I think there are indicators before it gets to that place. And that's really what we need to address.
Christine, you were in law enforcement, and as a survivor,
Mhm.
you s- you were in a particularly unique situation, and I understand that you have a really powerful story. So if you don't mind briefly kind of share your story and the evolution of how you finally were able to escape.
Um, so I met my ex-husband in 2005. We had our first child in 2006. The first incident of abuse was in late 2007 after a verbal altercation when I got up to leave and was going upstairs from the basement, and all of a sudden it felt like the house fell on top of me, and I wasn't sure what had happened. I actually thought the house did fall on top of me. It's an older home, and I quickly realized it wasn't that. He was on top of me. He was straddling on top of me, choking the life out of me with his hands wrapped around my throat, sitting on top of me. He had slammed me to the concrete floor. And it was by the grace of God and the skills that I had, I was able to literally fight him off of me. I got up again and he grabbed my leg and pulled me back down, and we fought again. I got upstairs and was able to lock the basement door and the front door. And I was able to retrieve my weapon and go and lock myself in the room with my son and barricade myself in there. And that's where I stayed for almost 12 hours. But I was in such shock and disarray because, I was in law enforcement at the time, and I thought, this doesn't happen to me. I help people like this. And I thought, oh my God, what had just happened? Um, I couldn't believe it, and I thought, what do I do now? I was embarrassed. I didn't want to tell anybody. And, I stayed. And things got better. I learned later what, the I love yous, I won't do this again, was the love bombing and that evolution. But I never really trusted him. I never turned my back on him. Um, and he came after me again about a month later, and I was able to get away in my bathrobe, curlers in my hair, barefoot, managed to get my son, who was just 18 months old, and grab my keys and get out the door. Um, and we were gone for a little over a year. And that was the first time I filed for a protective order, and he went through anger management. But I went back again. it was the idea of believing that anger management was going to help him, that he could change, I could fix him, I could give my child a better life, two parents. Um, and I've learned through healing and the programs that the Family Justice Center since offer, that I was able to go through and heal, in the programs that they have for survivors, that the cycle I was in was this love bombing, good behavior, to lure me back in, but it didn't last because
Hmm.
I was injured in the line of duty, and that's when he went back to his true colors of abuse. And in 2015, my daughter went downstairs, and her father was down there, and she came upstairs sobbing, crying uncontrollably. I could barely understand her. My mom was in the kitchen with me, and her knees were all bruised and red, and all I could understand from her was, Daddy threw me off the couch. He threw me across the room. And our basement was cement and concrete. And I went downstairs and trying to figure out what happened, and he came after me again and attacked and had me pinned against the laundry room door, hand on my throat, ready to punch me. And my mom appeared at the top of the stairs and said, "You're not going to do that. And, it'd be the last thing." And she saved me. And I left for good
Mm.
that day and never looked back. But, I
You
spent,
know, Christina, if I may, I want to drill down a little bit more because I'm hearing so many things in your powerful story that I have questions, and I'm sure a lot of people have questions about. And because I can imagine there were just so many points where you could have not survived,
mhm.
to be quite honest. And I want to talk to you about not only your healing, but also the healing of the family. But before I do that, I wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity briefly, Denise, because there's the event is coming back that is going to help support this wonderful organization that both you and Christine are part of. And so if you could talk to me about the this 2024 Dancing with the Stars event that's coming up.
Absolutely. Well, we, again, through the foundation, the Prince George's County Family Justice Foundation, are hosting our second annual Dancing with the Stars fundraiser. It is an event that will be held to support a newer initiative that we've implemented here at the Family Justice Center called Camp Hope. Again, much of what you're hearing and what we're going to talk about, hopefully, is that this is really learned behavior, and we're trying to prevent it before it becomes a cycle, an intergenerational cycle of abuse. So we are taking children between the ages of 7 and 16 to an overnight camping and mentoring program with trauma-informed counselors, where they are actually learning how to develop healthy coping skills, healthy behaviors, resiliency, and really just an opportunity to be children. We know that children that have been exposed to trauma and abuse struggle. It affects them in many ways, more ways than people even realize. So we're going to get to the root of it and help these kids to grow up to be healthy and productive. So the event is going to be on October 26th at Martin's Crosswinds, and we would love for listeners to come out and join. It's fun, entertaining, and supporting a great cause.
How can they find out more about this? Give me the website if you can
The
quickly.
website would be it would be PGC Family Justice Center Foundation.org.
One more
Once
time, please.
that would be PGC Family Justice Center Foundation.org. Everything
Wonderful.
about the event is listed there. So thank
Thank
you.
you. Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk about it a bit as well on the other side. We are going to take a quick break, but don't forget you can hear this in every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com. The original Quiet Storm is next on WHUR. I'm Harold Fisher. This conversation continues on Sirius XM channel 141 and 96.3 HD2 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM Channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our discussion about domestic violence. My guests are Denise McCain, Executive Director of the Prince George's County Family Justice Center, and Christine Neely, domestic violence survivor and board member of the Prince George's County Family Justice Center Foundation. Before the break, Christine, you were sharing your story, and I would imagine, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but prior to your meeting your ex-husband, that you had relationships and you had dated and that kind of thing. Is that
That's correct.
okay? Had you ever experienced anything close to that? Any kind of abusive behavior, physical or otherwise?
No, no.
So my question is that I'm sure, first of all, when it happened, it had to be a shock to you.
It was a total shock, and it was
Yeah.
life jarring, altering, all of those things, and embarrassing. Here I was in that position and with a child.
Mm.
And I was young. I was 26 too. I was very, very young looking back. Totally perplexed. What now? What happens? And the Family Justice Center wasn't around then. This was prior to 2016. There weren't the resources that we have now. So that was another factor, where do you go? Where do you turn?
Because, it's funny, and I don't mean funny, ha, but often and, Denise, you certainly know this, there are sometimes family cycles of abuse where we've seen it happen with mothers and grandmothers, and it's hard to even break that cycle. And that's why I mentioned the horrific shock for Christine, because if you'd never seen it in your dating life before, and now here's the man you marry, and it happens. From your perspective, Denise, what advice would you give to women or partners, even men? What are the red flags, if any, prior to getting involved? I think that's really, really important. How can people protect themselves?
Sure, and I think that's an important question. And there are red flags. Recognize that perpetrators never really show themselves. Otherwise, they would not be in relationships with victims. We call it the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde syndrome. They present themselves as charming, lovely gentlemen, supportive, attentive, all the things that women would want in a relationship. It's only after that person, the woman, is now deeply involved, that they start to show their true colors. So my advice is always, first and foremost, take your time. Anytime someone is ready to jump into a relationship, I love you, I want to be with you, I can't be without you, that element, which may appear to be just really being extremely attentive and caring, is really a mask for being controlling and manipulative. So those are some of the things that disguise themselves. And it's very easy for a person to get caught up in an abusive relationship and not even realize where they are, what has happened to them until after the fact. So again, quickly wanting to get involved. Christine talked about the love bombing, can't live without you, doesn't want you to be with family and friends, starting to isolate you, making comments about what you wear, how you look, who you're with, where you're going, call me, checking in, the constant need to always be there. Those are indicators. And as I said, they don't necessarily present themselves as red flags. It's easy for them to be disguised as, I care so much about you, I love you, I just want to make sure you're safe, that I know where you are, or this is only because I want the best for you. So you have to really pay attention to what those indicators are and see it for what it is. Anybody that falls in love with you within a week or 2 weeks, that's a problem. That should be a real red flag.
Yeah, because unless you're just such a wonderful person.
Listen, I don't care how great and wonderful you are. You gotta tell me you love me in a week. I'm a little concerned.
Certainly,
I'm concerned.
and I certainly kid, but um, Christine, you spoke about your ex-husband going through anger management, and I think that is anger management therapy, and I think that is such an important part of this. But apparently, based on what you've shared with us, it did not work. Um, Talk to me about your thoughts about that
Mhm.
process and perhaps why it did not uh, work.
So, I've learned so much from um,
Hmm.
the healing and the trauma counseling and programs that I've been lucky enough and blessed to have through the Family Justice Center and the Stay in Touch program. But through all of that, I've learned that it isn't anger management that these abusers need. What they really need is the domestic violence intervention program for the abusers. And it's a much different program than anger management because domestic violence abusers, it's not about necessarily anger, it's about power and control. So putting them through an anger management program doesn't address the power and control issues. Abusers, it's all about the power and control. So while yes, there's anger in it, it's more about the power and control issues. So while he went through anger management and the counseling, it never addressed the main issues. So that was never going to help the problem at home with us. It was just going to mm, kind of stifle the fire, if you will, but still allow it to smolder until it reignited.
So,
Hmm. You,
I do want
you
to,
know,
I'm sorry, Harold, I do want to comment because that's a good question as well. Anger management, more often than not, is court ordered, it's mandated.
mhm,
Abusers, when they go, they don't go because they recognize they have a problem or they want to get help. They go because they're forced to go.
Hmm.
Anytime you're in a situation where you're made to do something, you're not there for the right reasons. They have to take accountability for their behavior. They have to want to change, acknowledge that what I am doing is harmful, it's wrong, and I want to do better. Anger management does not help them with that, which is why, the research has shown that the recidivism rates for anger management, anger abuser intervention programs is extremely, extremely low. They end up right back in those situations, as was the case with Christine, because they're not there for the right reasons. They're not being taught to be accountable, to take responsibility for their actions.
no, Christine, you said after a year you went back. What made you think that that was the right thing for you and the children to do at the time?
Um, well, during that year, he was going to the anger management sessions. He was saying all the right things. He was doing all of the right things. Um, he kept uh, pulling at my heartstrings, so to speak, with don't you want our son to grow up with two parents? I came from a divorced household. My dad
Hmm.
was not present. He was not a good man, so to speak, my father. Um, and those things, he was saying the things he knew would get to my heart, so to speak, with the, giving our son a two-parent household. It would never happen again. He would be better. He had quit drinking, which was an issue. Um,
Hmm.
so he was saying all the right things, and in that year, doing all of the right things, and along with, if I've done it for a year, I can keep doing it. Um, and I thought I felt like I owed it to my son to at least try, and so I did.
That makes so much sense. I can just putting myself in the shoes of someone, I mean, and it doesn't even have to be a violent situation, but if someone that you love
Mhm.
needs to change, okay, which may mean that that person, look, you've been unemployed and now you've got a job and you've held on to a job for a year and your finances are coming back together and all of these, why not? It makes sense, Christine, that, hey, it's almost logical. But as you've shared with us, it that didn't last.
Mm-mm. It did not. It lasted for a while, but um, My grandmother used to have a saying, a leper never changes its spots. And unfortunately, that was the case.
How did you finally l- leave this situation?
For me, it started in 2014. He was drinking, had escalated out of control. His anger was out of control. The abuse had started again. It started with verbal abuse and escalated to physical abuse. During one argument, he had destroyed the bedroom, throwing lamps at me and anything he could get his hands on. I remember shutting the bedroom door so the children wouldn't hear. Another time, he slammed the car door on me, and I had bruises all down my arm. And I had actually sought legal counsel with regards to leaving. And I remember two different attorneys telling me that the best I could hope for was 50-50 with custody. And I said, there's no way. He's abusing me. I don't want to leave my children with him. And so I stayed another 6 months for fear of having to split custody. And that was one of my battles because I was so afraid he was doing this to me. What would he do if he was alone with my children? And the thing that finally made me leave was the day that he hurt my daughter and threw her off the couch. And that's when I finally left. And I did fight in the courts for sole legal custody, but it took me almost 4 years to win. And during those 4 years, he was granted unsupervised visits, and he did abuse my children.
Your children are adults now. Is that correct?
My son is 18. My daughter is 15 and a half.
What impact do you see that this experience has had on them?
It's had a huge impact on them. My son was forced to be the protector of his sister during those visits. He suffered, I think, the greatest at times. But it's also given him the biggest heart to help, for compassion, and give back. I look at him today and I'm so proud of the young man that he's grown into, giving back to those in need. He's mentoring a young little boy in 4th grade now that is at risk and in a similar situation through a program at his college. My daughter has had mental health issues. In 2nd grade, because of the abuse, she threatened to kill herself and was picking at herself until she was bleeding. And but today, she, through the different programs, through the Justice Center and with mental health counseling, she's thriving and doing well. And again, after everything that she's been through, she volunteers and gives back because both of my children have repeatedly said they don't want other children to suffer and go through what they went through. And the reason I started speaking out and advocating was because of my children. My daughter walked out of court one day and said, "Why should I speak up and tell the truth? Nobody listens to me, Mama. And it's just going to make him worse towards me." And that's when I said, that's enough.
Denise, this speaks to the heart of the new program that
Yes.
you were speaking about earlier. Talk to me a little bit more about this example that Christine has shared and how children can be protected, but also educated. And the reason I say educated, because two things can happen, and you know this. If it happens to children, they could grow up being abusers, or they could grow up not being abusers. How do you define the line for children in this new program?
Well, what these children are seeing has become normal behavior to them. They have normalized the violence. They learn very early on about the power and control element. The person with the power is the person that's in control. What tools are these children, are they witnessing being used to gain and maintain that power. Those are the very same things that children are doing. They are oftentimes bullied and or bullying other kids because that's basically what they've been exposed to, that type of behavior. So this program really puts them in an environment where first and foremost they're with other children that have had similar experiences. That's the thing, one of the things about domestic abuse in the home when we're talking to children, they don't talk about it. You know, it's not something that they go out to school or be around their friends and say, hey, guess what's going on in my house? Or, you know, my mom and dad had a major fight last night and the police came, and they don't talk about it. There's still that element of shame, embarrassment. There's a stigma that children also experience being in that home with the just domestic abuse. So they're now around peers. They're around children that have had similar experiences. It's very interesting to even hear them talk about it. This is a national program that has a curriculum, and part of the tools that are used are storytelling. The kids are hearing about situations where children have been abused, or they've been in homes where the father may have gone to jail because of the domestic abuse. The end of the story is always something positive, because we want to teach them that you can overcome these challenges, teaching them resiliency. But what was so shocking to me was to hear how freely, oh yeah, my dad is in jail, my mom went to jail. You know, they talk about their experiences, which helps them to feel that they're not alone, that they're not the only ones that have experienced this. So with the trauma-informed counselors, we basically work with them. We don't focus on domestic violence. We focus on healthy behaviors, teaching them what conflict resolution should look like, how to really just have hope, how to have dreams, how to look forward to a future free of violence, knowing and believing that you can do, be, and have whatever it is that you may have. You know, domestic abuse steals dreams from kids. They don't know how to dream. They don't know how to think about a future. So this program gives them that support and also helps them to move beyond their current circumstances so that they're not repeating the vicious cycle of abuse.
Where will you find the children who will be helped by this program, and how many children will you be able to serve in this camp? And kind of explain how that would, how that would happen. I mean, it's one thing to have an adult survivor.
Mhm.
You kind of know where you find them, but the children and getting into these kinds of programs is certainly a much more delicate situation.
It's delicate and it's also difficult.
Yeah.
Our primary population are the children of our clients, children that we know are experiencing or living in homes where abuse is occurring. That's our primary population. However, this year we went into middle schools. We worked with principals and guidance counselors who also have a very good understanding and insight into certain their home situations. They know
Hmm.
which kids are having problems or things that have happened to them. So I think probably 50% of the children, we took 30 kids this past summer, I'd say about 50% of them came from the school systems, the public school system here in Prince George's County Middle School, and the others came from our population of clients. It's a very strenuous process because we actually screen the children, we screen their parents, because all children are not camp ready. Some children had some developmental delays, some of which were a result of emotional problems, some of which were a direct result of the victimization they've witnessed at home. Those children, all of them were not camp ready, so we could not accept them. We go through, like I said, a very comprehensive screening process. We do background with their guidance counselors. We have a counselor that even meets with the children as well as the parents before going to learn a little bit more about them, some of the history, some of the issues they have, so that we're better prepared to work with them and know what to expect, what challenges these children may have. So again, it's like I said, it's a very intense process, but it was life transforming for them. They are already talking about going back next year, wanting camp to be longer than a week. For those of us that were there, I don't know that we would be able to do that. It was quite an experience. I've never been to camp in my life, so it was the first time for me going to camp, and it was, you know, it
It
was
was a
quite
lot.
an experience. It was quite an experience, but it was worth it. It was more than worth it just to see where they were when they started and where they were. And that's the other thing. We do pre and post hope scores with them to see what are they hope, where are they, what is their level of hope prior to camp, and we do one after camp. And I'm telling you, it's just amazing to see the
Yeah, I was I
difference.
was I was about to ask, with this kind of being the first year of doing this, uh, how do you think it went? And obviously, camp or no camp for you, I would have loved to have seen that, but
It was.
you know,
Should have seen
um,
where we slept in a box. It was called the box.
They they traveled on
Yeah.
a luxury bus too. It was great.
Thanks to our board chair, vice chair, we did have a lovely bus to get us there. But this is a national evidence-based program, which we are now affiliated with, which allowed us Camp Hope America. So this camp is taking place around the country,
mhm.
and many, many states. So while it was our first time doing it, it has already been tested and proven, as I said, research-based, to have had tremendous outcomes for the children that participate in the camp. So I think we fit right in terms of just seeing where the children were. We've had parents that have called us and have said, "What have you done to my child?" I mean, really, these are kids who would not speak out, who were shy, who had been bullied, who were bullying. Their parents had immediately saw a difference when they came back. So that's why I said it's life altering, but it's one of the things that I think the areas that we should really focus on if we're looking at real prevention. Children are involved in these relationships very early on. They're exposed to it from infancy. And if we don't interrupt these patterns of abusive behavior, we're prone to see it continue into adulthood. So I think this is one of the areas that we really have to focus on doing more with helping children that are in these environments to change it so that they don't grow up to become victims or abusers.
And it,
Christine, let me ask you this. As I've listened to the trajectory of your
Mhm.
life and how you have evolved from uh from victim to survivor to healed person to advocate,
mhm.
um how are you doing now? This is always going to be a part of your life. How you address it is the change, the personal change agent. But when you sit and you look in the mirror in 2024 and you ask yourself, how is Christine doing? What's the answer?
I'm healing. I think every day is a journey, and I'm still on it. Um, I always say that I started this journey in the parking lot when I ran into a woman I had never met before. And lo and behold, it was Dr. Denise McCain. I was an angry victim that day. It was the day my daughter was in tears coming out of the courtroom, and I didn't know what to do with myself. And she said, "How can I help you? What's wrong?" And I said, "I'm so angry. Nobody is listening to me. I feel like the courts are making me a victim all over again, and my daughter." And she said, "I think I can help you." And she walked and talked with me, and she did. And she helped me find my voice and turn my anger into a passion for advocating, and helped me start healing. And that was the day I really started to heal and find my voice and find my passion for advocating, not just as a victim and survivor, but for the children. Advocating for children of domestic violence has always been my passion. I was so excited for Camp Hope, um, because I feel like the children are often the ones that are voiceless and don't have a voice when they are so impacted, if not the most impacted, by domestic violence. And so when I look in the mirror today, I think I'm doing okay and a pretty good job, and I think I can do better and do more as an advocate, and that's what I'd like to do. So
Hmm. Well said. Denise, I'll let you have the last couple of minutes to talk about this event coming up and what you hope will be the outcome from this fundraiser.
Well, you said it, it's a fundraiser. So the ideal outcome is that we raise a lot of money.
Mhm.
As you can hear, the camp was not cheap. We sent these kids or took them to camp free of charge. They had absolutely no expenses, even down to buying them all the essentials that they would need for camp, a bag, backpacks, everything that you take to camp, we provided it for them. Parents only had to bring them their clothing. We gave them everything else. So money is going to be essential. So we do hope that we'll raise a lot of money for the event. Also to increase awareness of domestic violence. Interestingly enough, this year, Harold, we have more men dancing than women. We have 5 men and only 2 women that are dancing. So yeah, it's different this year. So really wanting to raise awareness, but get men involved in this, because I think women have been at the forefront of this issue as advocates, leading advocates who are fighting for change, crying out for help. But I think we need to see more men who are stepping up and saying that we will not tolerate this behavior, that as men, we have to take a stand and come together and say that violence against anyone, but women in particular, is not acceptable. So we want to raise awareness about the issue. And then lastly, we want people to just come together and have a good time. I think you can attest to the fact that it was a fun-filled event. We have entertainment. We have Brian Lanier this year, who's actually going to open up and perform at the VIP reception. So, we just want people to come out, have a good time, but also leave with a better understanding of what this is, how prevalent it is, and that we all play a role in combating domestic violence.
Let me have that website real quick again, Denise, please, before I let you guys go.
It is PGC Family Justice Center Foundation.org.
Thank you so much, Dr. Denise McCain, Christine Neely. Thank you for participating in this conversation. Christine, keep on healing, and thank you for sharing with us as well.
Thank you, Harold.
You're quite welcome. That is the Daily Drum for this Thursday, October 17th. I'm Harold Fisher.